Hello and welcome to the Caring Matters podcast. I'm Liz Tassone, the volunteer host, and I'm here today with Ken Czillenger. Ken Czillenger is a grief educator in the Cincinnati area and has been doing this type of work for over 40 years.
That's right.
Wow, it's a long time. And on previous podcasts, we've talked to him about conversations with a terminally ill person. And we wanted to talk to Ken this time about conversations that we might have around Alzheimer's disease. I think Alzheimer's is one of those isolating diseases because, again, like with the dying, people are afraid of saying the wrong things, or they just are so uncomfortable with being present to them that they just don't show up at all. And so I think then their caregivers feel isolated and so on. So I'm wondering if you might be able to help us in that difficult conversation around Alzheimer's disease, for our caregivers especially.
Well, the first thing I think of as you say that is that about my brother Tom, who died last December. He was diagnosed in August of 2012 with mild cognitive impairment, which is really the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease. And one of the things that was evident, he had cost him his job, but it affected his memory. So I would pick him up at the bus station, for example, and on the way, 5-minute ride back home, he might ask me, "Ken, what did you have for lunch?" And I would tell him. And then maybe a minute would go by, and as if he had never said it before, he said, "Ken, what did you have for lunch?" So if you see the impact that this has on memory, and then as things would get more severe, it's very, very difficult. So I am very grateful, and maybe you could put it this way too, I have tremendous compassion for those people who are caregivers for someone, or sometimes more than one person with Alzheimer's, for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. I like to say, in my experience of the death of my brother, I had 4 prayers answered. One was, the first one, is that I would outlive him, and so I could complete my caregiving role. That happened. The second is that he would never know the hell of Alzheimer's disease. And so thank goodness that prayer was granted. Then third is that I would never know the day when he wouldn't know my name or call me by name. And then the last was that he would never be involved in wandering. I had just received a publication from the Alzheimer's Association around the idea of wandering, and one of the basic messages was, it's not a case of if, but when. And so also there's persons with Down syndrome have a high percentage chance of developing Alzheimer's, and especially as they live longer, like my brother did. He was 56 years of age. And so it is a very difficult road. I know part of the road. Other people, I think of a man who lives in the same area where we do. I believe his wife had it for 8 years, 2 years at home and 6 years in a facility. And what also is very important in saying that is, in caring for people, one of the most difficult things is to sustain your care and your commitment to them. And this man, he had difficulty with his own church because many people did not come at all to visit his wife. Some people might come only once, but they couldn't handle it. So it's some situations when you move into the area of Alzheimer's, dementia, those are more complicated situations, and to really be able to sustain that commitment is a very important thing to be able to do.
So what would be your, how might you help us to be able to visit those with Alzheimer's? Like, what can you help us with in terms of walking the door and seeing someone who has Alzheimer's, they don't recognize you maybe, and you're trying to carry on a conversation, or like in the case of your brother, all the repetition.
Yes.
So
But I would say the first thing that comes to mind there is that you may need someone to talk to yourself. Is that you may need to be debriefed. Some people may get involved in spiritual direction, other kinds of things, where they have an outlet to process the pain. There's a theologian I like very much who's living in Cincinnati now. His name is Walter Brueggemann, and one of his lines that I like very much is process your pain, process your pain. And so on the one hand, the patient needs to do that however possible, especially when you move into Alzheimer's. But what is also very important is that caregivers, loved ones, need to be able to do that, because it's a very difficult thing to experience, that helplessness that you experience, that you can't turn the clock back and so forth. But I think that becomes very important, that you may need some extra help yourself to process how painful it is, so then you've got some resilience and you can go back into that situation rather than just walk away.
Yeah, yeah. I think statistics show that our caregivers that are dealing with someone with Alzheimer's have the highest level of stress.
Yes.
So they are the most vulnerable to burnout and everything else. So the fact that they would have a place to be able to vent their frustrations and so whether that's spiritual direction, support groups, some place that's appropriate to be able to.
Right. I might add in my case, Liz, that I did not have family in Cincinnati. So I had no one. My sister lives in Colorado. All other families in different parts of the country. I didn't have a cousin or anybody here, And so that makes it more difficult too, because friends are great, but oftentimes there's going to be a boundary. That there's a difference between a good friend and a relative, someone who's a blood relative. And so that complicated my situation, is that I didn't, in fact, one of the things I had planned on doing, I had worked out with my sister, thinking that Tom would still be living, is that this year I'm going to take a 12-day trip to Alaska. And that was sort of one of those things on my bucket list, and so my sister was going to care for Tom, but she had to be prepared. Where would the caring take place? She was in Colorado, and up in the past he'd been able to go there. But the Alzheimer's Association was very helpful, because they said by that time, depending on what happens, that may be a trip that Tom couldn't take. She would need to come here.
Oh, wow.
So that,
was she prepared to do that? Was she willing to?
I think that she would have been able to do that. And that's what, again, his death just made that completely different. And even though I can see now, if Tom had still been alive and I was on that trip, I wouldn't have been 100% present to that trip, because you still wonder about the person, worry about the person, think about the person. Now I can go in peace.
Yeah. But the fact that you were willing to recognize that you needed a break and make plans.
Right. I think I like to say that it's very important as we go through life to develop both our giving skills and our receiving skills. It may be more blessed to give than receive, but for most people it's harder to receive than to give. And I don't know how this all happened. It was really, to me, the grace of God. But early on in this work, I was able to ask for help. And I tell people, I said I had 3 strikes against me. Number 1 being male, that I'd push receiving away. Second, by being German, by background, culture. And then third, coming from the western side of Cincinnati. Where you're highly independent. And I remember even when I was in hospice work, you'd make phone calls, and oftentimes people, if they're on the west side, they would say that they didn't need any help. They saw us as a family. But what they didn't realize is oftentimes you circle the wagons as a family, but all those family members are in need. Who's going to be of help? And so people have to break through and say, hey, let's get some help.
Yeah, I think that you're right on in terms of people resisting asking for help. There's a vulnerability there.
Right.
And yet, everybody wants to help. They get some feel good from helping, and it's like what makes the world go round if you can accept help and people want to help.
That's right.
So you're giving them a gift,
An opportunity to do
Yeah.
that, because they can't change, like if it's Alzheimer's, they can't change the process of the disease, or make it go away, but they can do something, to help you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing this insight. You've got a lot of, obviously, many years of caregiving experience, and I think it will translate to help our caregivers as well. Just your openness to talk about your situation. We really appreciate it.
Right, thank you, Liz.
So I want to thank Ken Czillenger once again for sharing with us his own story and the wisdom that he's gained in living it and sharing that with us. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Vitas Hospice, Hillebrand Home Health, Home Care by Blackstone, Family Bridges Home Care, Lifespan, and Bailey. I'm Liz Tassone, and always remember that caring matters.